Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Logan, everybody, it's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and welcome back to Joe on Joe, the only podcast where I've covered every episode of the G.I. Joe Sunbow cartoon, the DIC even Extreme, and every issue of the Marvel Real American Hero comic book page by page, panel by panel. Now, this week, we're taking a break from our Action Force foray, and we're diving back into You on Joe. You on Joe is where you, the G.I. Joe fan, you love everything there is about G.I. Joe, but you always have one specific thing that you really, really dig. And whatever that is, we want to talk about it. So if you want to participate and be a future guest on this show, please reach out to me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Joe on Joe Pod, or you can send me an email to joeonjoepod@gmail.com. And let's get you on the show. We can promote your Joe-related thing. We can promote your non-Joe-related thing, but still talk about G.I. Joe. You guys know how this works. And while you're online, please give us a rate and review for whatever podcast app you're working on. Every review helps grow the show. If you're so inclined, you can visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/JoeOnJoePod and check out what we got going on there. Now, here's what's going on with our sponsors, the Movies and a Meal podcast. In the beginning of time, the smallest organism gained sentience and thought to itself, I really need a good meal. Then, a bunch of other stuff happened, and finally the Lumiere brothers started showing movies in France. This was all the inspiration that fellow broadcasters Brad, Keith, and Ben needed to combine these two primal needs into the Movies and a Meal podcast. The Movies and a Meal is one of the most casual and relaxing film talk podcasts you could ever listen to. These three friends enjoy a good meal together while talking all about the movies. And not just reviews, they do favorite lists, comparison discussions, genre talks, anything and everything that you can think of. They've even broken their solemn promise inherent in the name and branched out into TV talk. So I love the variety of films they bring to the table. They cover new releases, classics, cult films, often in one episode. It's really a delight to listen to, and it has something for every movie fan out there to enjoy. So if you're looking to grow your podcast library, if you eat meals, and if you've ever seen a movie, then you should give Ben, Keith, and Brad a listen and subscribe to the Movies and a Meal podcast. They've been a great sponsor to this show. I love the Movies and a Meal podcast, and I'd like all of you to love them too. Okay, now it's time to put your earbuds on, crank your radio to 11, because this week my special guest is none other than the Wordburglar himself. That's right, the brilliant artist behind the hit new song 1984's from that new album Spin-A-Rack, and the classic LP that all of you G.I. Joe fans should know about, Welcome to Cobra Island. Wordburglar joined me this week to discuss his music career and the great G.I. Joe focused music that are must-listens that he has been putting out for well over a decade now. I could have talked with Wordburglar for hours. He has that passion for not only G.I. Joe, but the 1980s comic book culture that I absolutely live in. That's the wheelhouse on this show. That's where I thrive, and Burglar fits right into that. You must follow him on social media, elevate his voice, share that great video he put together for the 1984 song. His YouTube channel is Wordburglar Official. It's got all of his work, and he is at Wordburglar on Twitter. You can also go to Bandcamp and search for his music there, where, according to Burglar, you can get all of his music for that pay what you want rate. And he is all about you paying what you want. He wants you to hear his music, and we want you to hear it too. You can also find him on iTunes and all that stuff. He's got a large collection of hits, and they're all, geek culture focus centric. They're fantastic. So we're going to play some music throughout this episode. Listen through to the end, but most of all, enjoy this conversation with me and the one and only Wordburglar. How long you been making your own music and stuff?
Since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Honestly, since I was probably grade, 5th or 6th grade is when I started just dabbling, and it was always just something I did for fun and I love doing. And my older cousin for lack of a better term, is a musical genius, and he could play any instrument, and he had his own 4-track, and he used to mess around, and he knew I liked rap, and he was like, why don't I just make a rap beat? You can try rapping over it. And I just basically freestyled songs. Well, he recorded me on 4-track, and they were just silly songs. And I would just kind of rhyme about whatever. I remember being in 6th grade and rapping about a pterodactyl that was on the wall. And just, I liked rhyming, and I just enjoyed the beats and the
Yeah.
rhythm and the storytelling. And honestly, it was just my friends just kind of kept encouraging me, and we'd go somewhere and be like, oh, yo, SJ, man, you know, kick some rhymes, do some rhymes. I'm like, all right. And I always just had rhymes in my head.
Uh-huh.
And then when I'd run out of whatever was in my head, I'd just improvise and freestyle. And that's how I just kind of developed a skill to freestyle rhymes and free associate stuff. And I was just always making songs and listening to rap every day. So music was like, I was just being constantly fueled by whatever hip hop I could find.
And who were your influences?
Oh yeah, like early days, it would have been like Public Enemy, Fresh Prince, into the 90s when like I was, you know, getting into my teens, like Nas and Wu-Tang Clan were huge for me.
Mm-hmm.
Master Ace, another, a lot of the East Coast stuff, a lot of California. I know you're based in LA. A lot of MCs, a lot of Oakland, actually. I like Del the Funky Homo Sapien.
But I've got Chicago heart.
Much...
I've got Chicago heart, so I feel like my tastes go both coasts.
Chicago's great. I mean, Common, back when Common was Common Sense, right?
Yeah.
Repping Chicago, and so many great, I mean, you know, you name a city or state, right? I think I listened to The Roots a lot from Philadelphia. And in Canada, we had an MC named Maestro Fresh West, who I guess the closest equivalent for an American rapper was kind of like Rakim, I would say.
Oh,
like,
wow.
He was very influenced by that style of Rakim. And Maestro Fresh West, if for any listeners unfamiliar, definitely look him up. He was the first Canadian rapper to have a gold record, and he must have gone platinum or something by now. I mean, maybe I'm giving him more accolades than he got, but he's still out there doing it now, and he's a legend here. And
that's dope.
You know, I had all his records. And
I feel like you're forgetting the greatest Canadian rapper of all time, Snow, who gave us the album. 12 Inches of Snow.
That's right. I did have that album. I think every kid had it. It was mandated.
That's awesome. And those are amazing influences.
I'll tell you about put on MC Shan was through Snow, and then that opened up a whole other world. So
well, I looked up Snow recently because I was curious. I remember Informer as a kid, but I didn't know much. I guess he was an amazingly talented producer, you know, and you know that's a great song. But I guess that's where he really thrived, and apparently long career with that, right? Like probably still doing it, I imagine.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've never met Snow, but anyone who I know who has met him has nothing but the greatest things to say about. I mean, Snow is. I mean, it's huge. I mean, Informer's huge, and he did have more hits. I don't think he ever had anything. It's interesting. It's one of those, like, that was off his first album, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I know. And but yeah, Snow, and there's a lot of great Canadian rappers. Buck 65, who used to have a radio show where I grew up in Halifax on the east coast of Canada, Nova Scotia. He had a college hip hop radio show and would play a lot of underground stuff, which exposed me to that stuff early on.
Mm-hmm.
Which, anyway, so I got a great education in hip hop at a very young age, and
That's
older
amazing.
kids and my cousins and all these people would just it filtered down, right? And, you know, growing up in that time before the internet, any music you could find, as I'm sure you understand, like when you find anything, comics, toys, cartoons, music, whatever, video games, it was like cherished.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't the greatest thing, you're just like, wow, like, what is this? I don't know anything about this. And I think that curiosity has kind of led into a lot of the storytelling I do with my songs now. And just those days of, you see something once, you may never see it again, right? When
Mm-hmm.
G.I. Joe aired, there's a 2-parter for Worlds Without End.
Oh.
If you miss this conclusion, you may never see it again.
I mean,
you may never know what happens to Steeler.
That was a game changer for so many of us.
Right?
That was a game changer for so many of us. Yeah. That was, for me, that was the introduction of, you know, today, 40 years later, the most popular thing in the world is the idea of multiverses. For me, that at 9, 10 years old, that was wait a minute, there's other worlds besides ours? And so now we're all seeing that. We're saying we'll play catch up the rest of the world because we've all been on this since 1985. So at what point did you shift, or maybe it was never a shift, but like so many of your songs that I was listening to, and listeners were talking about the albums, Spinnerax's latest LP, EP. What would you call that? An LP?
It's an EP.
EP.
Here,
it's really great.
Funny side note of that. Thank you. I called it an EP. It's 7 tracks. It's 6 songs and a remix. I called it an EP. I put it up on Spotify.
Mm-hmm.
They took it off Spotify and iTunes, and they said, you can't call this an EP. It's technically an album because it's 7 tracks. So if you listen to it on streaming anywhere other than Bandcamp, this is just a fun, useless bit of info, but kind of strange and frustrating. Bandcamp is the only place. It's called the Spinnerack EP, and the artwork says EP on it. But if you listen on iTunes or Spotify, anywhere else, it's just called the Spinnerack. But for people who know, I call it an EP.
Well,
but yeah, thank you.
I grabbed it off iTunes, and then I also certainly Welcome to Cobra Island, which is 100% G.I. Joe centric, which is obviously the thrust of this show. But they're both very obviously G.I. Joe centric, but then Spinnerack is really comic book focused, and your raps are so detailed to the minutia of what was on Spinnerack? It was the other, talking about the other shop. Your song, The Other Shop.
The Other Shop.
The guy was the weird guy who's never had a girlfriend. Like just the descriptions you hit on The Weird Shop, which was the final track. I was like, oh, this is great. Oh, he's talking about this old shop he used to go to. I imagine like Fan Base, was that the name of a shop you used to actually be at or something?
There's 2 different songs. So the old back issues that are highly overpriced that no one's ever going to buy, but they might have that one issue of Spider-Man you need. So you have to go across town to go to The Other Shop.
Yeah.
And risk exposing yourself to all these,
to the reason you don't normally go to the other
characters.
Shop. Yeah,
exactly. So, and that song is based on real experience and inspired by other shops I've been to all over America.
It's true.
Canada. And I'm a lifelong comic book reader. The Spinnerack, I named that EP. It's named after the comic book Spinneracks, and that's where I first got exposed to comic books.
Mm-hmm.
The Spinneracks at the corner stores and the grocery stores and the gas stations, and they got me hooked. And so the Spinnerack is named after the comic racks where I first discovered comics at the corner stores and gas stations as a kid. And those early days, like being exposed to comics in that way, where you'd buy them out of order, I'd get like issue 38 of G.I. Joe, and then I might not find another issue until it was like 59 or something. And you just kind of had to piece together what happened in your head, and you'd make up your own stories. And to answer your question about the Fan Base, that song, Remember the Fan Base, it's a fictitious comic store, but I worked in comic book retail for, I guess, a total of about 15 years at 2 different comic shops in Canada, great shops, Strange Adventures and the Silver Snail. And I've always been interested in that for those into comic books and like yourself, the idea of the direct market and the history of how comic shops became these independent places and how they all started out, they started independently, but then over time they unified, and there's, the whole, it's a huge history there. And I've always been fascinated by it, and especially working in a shop and seeing the behind the scenes stuff, and from being the first one to open those boxes of comics when they show up, to catching shoplifters, to dealing with customers of all different tastes. I've just always been, I guess you could call it the lore of the local comic shop. So that's where the Fan Base came from. And the Spinnerack EP is the first in a series of EPs that I'm doing, kind of set in the world of comic books and cartoons and action figures in that world. So a song like 1984, in that universe, 1984 is like the G.I. Joe equivalent, right? It's like the #1 toy line. And you'll hear references to comic book characters that I've created, like Flag Person and these, kind of ridiculous things. There's Grandpa Funny Book, and he's the creator of all your favorite special characters. And so you as
code name, the guy who gives people code names.
Exactly. So yeah, it's a lot of fun,
You've
and
got to dime.
just
You've got to
me
dime my
just
video for that too. So listeners, you need
thank
to
you.
find it on YouTube. We've been sharing it on Twitter for the last couple weeks, so I'll certainly retweet it out again. And you need to follow him on Twitter as well. It's at Wordburglar, real easy to find, and it's a great video. Did you custom all those GI Joe figures into the figures, or who did all the customs
No,
for
so the
those?
customs are by Rob Ozzy Osborne out of Michigan, and I met Ozzy through when I released Welcome to Cobra Island. I had a song on there called Rap Viper, which was another character
An
that I
amazing song.
created who's basically, thanks, man. He's Rap Viper grew up on Cobra Island. For all intents and purposes, he's me if I was born in that alternate universe to parents who worked for Cobra. And so Rap Viper, me, grew up on Cobra Island amongst all these villains, and then grew up to be a rapper within the ranks of Cobra, and then raps about all of his experiences on Cobra Island and encountering the Dreadnoks or Zartan, Big Boa, Crocmaster, everybody, right?
Name checking name checking everybody, and accurately name
Yeah.
checking everybody too, which is key.
Well, thank you. And we can get into it. I mean, I take it very seriously. So, I was making the album that I wanted, 8-year-old me. This is the exact G.I. Joe album that I would have dreamed of.
Yeah, and
So that's why I made it.
Shifting to Welcome to Cobra Island, it does tell a story. Your first track, Welcome to Cobra Island, you managed to hit on all of the brilliant touches that I've discovered in the years I've been doing this podcast, that they've built a world. If you really take everything, everything that they've given us and all the cartoons and all the, all the comic books and everything, if you take it seriously, they've built a world where Cobra is possibly the most efficient, complex business organization in the entire globe, where they have, vacation spots, they have monthly magazines, they have insurance plans, and they're just this deep organization. And then your description of on Welcome to Cobra Island, you get into all the details of what life would really be like living there. And I can tell it's written by someone who's also paid attention to those kinds of things. It's not throwaway. These are the guys who are really having the adventures. The Joes are just playing catch all the time.
100%. And thank you. I'm so glad that you got that from it. It's absolutely true. And to me, and it's what you said, it's like combining if you take all that stuff, and basically with Welcome to Cobra Island, the whole album, I took all what I thought was the most interesting and the most fun and exciting and terrifying, really, if you really get into it, all the things from the comics and cartoons and the action figure file cards and everything. Maybe I've been obsessed with G.I. Joe my whole life. I mean, or maybe I just enjoy it so much and it's so great that I can't forget about it. But I spent, especially I talk about working in the comic shop, I was known as like the G.I. Joe guy who probably wouldn't shut up about why G.I. Joe was like the greatest comic ever. I love all comics, but the Larry Hama Marvel run is incredible.
Stellar,
and what a feat. And Larry not only is just such an incredible storyteller and has such great military accuracy, but can also play in like this superhero space. And he also has such an incredible sense of humor, which I feel like people might kind of ignore. But when you read those comics, there's some brilliant humor in there. There's also a lot of insight. There's a lot of commentary. There is a lot of heavy stuff that gets thrown at you. And as a 7 to 12-year-old reading those comics and beyond, I'll go back and read them all the time. He didn't talk down to the readers. And so I have the utmost reverence for his work on that and everything he did in crafting the whole Joe universe of the 80s. And then, of course, I have a lot of love for the cartoons, too. Really quick, back to Ozzy. He customized the toys, and I met him because he made a Rap Viper custom figure. So that was the thread, picking up that loose thread there.
Oh, no, that's dope.
Sure
so then did he specifically make customs for each of the characters in Rap Viper? Or I'm sorry, in 1984? 1984?
In 1984, yeah. So I reached out to him because he gave me this incredible Rap Viper figure. That's how I met him, and we were at a G.I. Joe con in, I guess it was Colorado, where I first met him. and he presented me with this rap viper. I was just blown away, and we became fast friends because shared a lot of the same, same interests, and we both like GI Joe a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just a great guy, and we just stayed in contact. And then I had this idea for 1984, and yeah, that was my dream. Like if I could do like a toy commercial, like a satire of the insanity of these toy commercials that were marketed to kids, specifically in the 80s,
Mm-hmm.
where you'd get some high energy, for lack of a better term, lunatic yelling at the kids to essentially buy the toys.
Yeah, you were this.
I'm
You in that
describing what
video.
happens
You're
in the
this.
movie.
You're this. This side short of the Micro Machines guy. You're in that same family. Like you're his nephew that he once gave good advice to.
Well, yeah, you look at it. There's people like jumping out of boxes, and like it's some of those commercials are just beyond. They're just bonkers.
Another favorite. I think the name was Child Kick.
Yeah, child. What's a kid doing there?
Yeah. The two two people. And am I to infer later on that one of the people that had the affair is the single dad guy? I forget what his name was.
Last Nerve.
Last Nerve, yeah. I inferred that
Well,
as a single dad, perhaps Last Nerve is the father of Child Kick.
It is, there is, you could definitely read into that. You'll have to wait to read all 1980 issues of the comic book to get the full story.
I think this is
is
the kind of thing that I think you reach out to. Oh man, who did the GI Joe Transformers crossover? Why am I blanking on his name? The giant cartoony one.
Tom Scioli.
Tom Scioli. I feel like this is the kind of thing you go to Tom Scioli and you guys do a one-shot special.
He's man. I would
amazing.
Absolutely love that, and that's a brilliant idea. I mean, I loved his GoBots comics too. Like he's great.
Or the guy who does
Korba.
The guy who does Korba.
Yeah,
You're familiar with that?
Michelle Fife.
Yes.
Yep. Oh
Fife,
yeah. That whole squad. Oh yeah. Sounds like we're reading the same comics. That whole squad, the cartoonist kayfabe guys. Yeah. So 1984. Ozzy made all the figures, and I believe it's 24. Is it 24 plus code name, which would be 25?
He made all 25. That's amazing.
I pitched the idea. I was like, hey man, like this is this new song I'm working on. Would you like to, it'd be amazing if you could maybe like make a, one or two customs. He heard the song and he was like, man, I want to make every single one of these characters. And I was like, that is beyond, I couldn't even believe it. And we made them O-ring, of course.
Yes.
Had to be O-ring. And yeah, it was Ozzy all the way, and he did a killer job. And here's something fun. We shot the video in Toronto, in Canada, where I live, and he lives in Michigan. And I was like, well, what do you want to do? We'll FedEx them up here. And he was like, no, I don't trust shipping all these custom toys that, I worked so hard on. I'm not going to put them in a box in the mail, and then who knows what's going to happen. He said he drove them from Michigan to Toronto just for the video shoot. It was just absolutely incredible. And then he helped us, and he helped set them up, and he was like off camera with paint just in case like paint chipped off the custom. We were there with like replacement thumbs, for these shows. So he's the star, right? And he's got a cameo in the end credits. You can see him. There's a scene where I'm with a group of people, and Ozzy's in there. So anyways, it's I'm glad you liked the video, because it's
a lot of fun,
a crazy amount of fun to do.
Yeah. Have you done, and I forgot to do research on this before we spoke, have you done a lot of videos for your songs?
Yeah. I've done over the years. I've probably done like, I don't know, 20.
Awesome.
And every
all on,
video
all
I
on
make,
YouTube,
I try and
all on
make it
YouTube,
different
I'm
from
assuming.
Yeah, they're all on YouTube. Wordburglar official. I think most of them are there. There might be a handful that are scattered throughout the ether, released by a few different record labels I was on. But for the majority of them, they're all on my YouTube channel. And,
awesome.
Definitely. There's a Rap Viper video that we released in with Welcome to Cobra Island. If you haven't seen that, definitely check that out,
Yeah.
because that's, the full Cobra shebang, and we've got CGI hiss tanks and stuff in it. It's crazy.
Oh, that's crazy. I'll have to check that out. I think the
Yeah.
strength of the rhymes on Called Destro and just the rhythm of the beat on that might be the strongest track on that album as far as like, memorable rhythm, the rhythm that sticks in your head. That Called Destro song is fantastic.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some rhyme schemes on there, if we're going to get nerdy, that I'm really happy about. And of course, every reference on that entire album, every single line can be traced back to something else.
Yeah.
So in that Destro song, there's references to the Deke cartoon series, which, some people like to think doesn't exist. But the way I
No.
looked at it, I was like, listen, this is all,
It's all part
it
of the
all happened.
It's all part of the
whether
pantheon.
you like it or not.
Yeah, it's all part of the great
So
tapestry.
and to somebody, it's their favorite thing. So
Yep.
I don't know who that somebody is. I've never met
I don't
them. I
either.
would probably question their taste. But
Hey, we covered Extreme on this show. I covered Extreme, and
Extreme.
I stand by this statement. The stories on Extreme are really good. The animation does not live up to anything quality at all. The animation is lacking. But they told some great stories on that. So there is something to like in every iteration of G.I. Joe.
It's funny. I'll give you that, because when it came out, I didn't hate the cartoon. The
Mhm.
toys,
Oh.
I just were like, these are horrible.
Yeah,
they were just
toys are
not posable. They're Kenner. They were like worse than the unposable. Like, I don't know. Anyways.
No, yeah, toys were
hate.
terrible. But even within the toys, though, the design work was pretty good. What's his name? The leader, the Skull guy. Is it Skull?
Yeah, Scar. Ironclaw.
Ironclaw. That design's really great.
The leader of Scar.
Yeah, that design's really great. And then years later, they made an O-ring of it, and you're like, yeah, this is how good it could have been. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. And that Sergeant Savage that came out right before it is great. The pilot was super cool. And
the artwork on the figures was all Joe Kubert,
Yeah, totally.
You're not going wrong with that.
Yeah, I know I told you we could get into just any aspect of Joe.
Really
I'd love to just talk about it.
Burglar, everything you're saying is right up my alley. I mean, honestly, that's why when I heard Spinner Rack, I'm like, all this speaks to me. Just this is the stuff, and like even the era you spoke about, or rhymed about, we'll say, like 79 to like 2009. You're talking about the right era, because it was when Iron Man blew up that the small ghettoized, I go to a comic book shop vibe disappeared for a lot of us, because when Iron Man blows up, then everyone's going to comic shops. Everyone's, I'm into comics. Oh, I love comics. What have you read? Oh, I saw Iron Man, And that is right around that era. And you have a line in there, something, it's like from 78 or 79 or something like that to 2009.
Late 70s to 2009.
And that really is it. I think historically people are going to say, that was the era for, not to, I don't mean it to be a gatekeeper, but for like the comic fan who was in it for the comics,
Well, man, you're the first person to call out that line to me. And you nailed it. That's exactly it. Like, that was a particular pocket in time. And it's funny to me, like working in comic shops after the Marvel Universe movies started blowing up. I mean, it was fantastic, but I was frustrated because I felt like even those movies were not, even though they essentially were advertisements for all the great comic book content that was out there, there was not a lot of sending people back to the comic shops.
No, there really wasn't.
So as an independent comic shop retailer, it almost felt like, hey, we help sustain these universes for years. When the pharmacies and the corner stores stopped having spinner racks and you couldn't get comics anywhere and there was no more subscriptions, these local comic shops helped Marvel and DC and all these publishers and indies. They just kept had a place for comics. And it just felt like, okay, well, I mean, it's not like the movies owe the comic shops something, but in a way it was kind of like you have the biggest blockbuster movies in the last 40 years. Those Marvel movies were just Millions and millions of people saw those movies. Thanos became a household name. Ego the Living Planet
Ego,
became a
the
household name.
living planet.
And Rocket
Yes.
Raccoon, I got a Rocket Raccoon comic by Mike Mignola off
Uh-huh.
a spinner rack. I remember that
Yep.
limited series. So right there with my GI Joes, with my Mike Zeck covered GI Joes, like
Mhm.
those. So I mean, this is again stuff that, and I don't. It's like I don't fault anyone, but it's also like
Well, I think
with all these millions of people going to the movies,
Yeah.
you could go and then these comic shops are like closing because they just couldn't afford to pay their rent and whatever. It was like,
Yeah, no, it is
just
it is
like
crazy.
it was
A-
crazy.
And I think one of the most short-sighted things that we'll just say the movie studios, the movie side of it. One of the most short-sighted things that they're doing is they don't admit or they don't realize that the comic books, the monthly comic books, they're the incubator for the good ideas. And I know they'll say, "Oh yeah, we're pulling from these great stories," but what they're not seeing is that yeah, those great stories came out, but then 10 months out of the year were these other stories with, I wouldn't say bad ideas, but lesser ideas. That then another writer came through a year later and took one of those lesser ideas and made it a little better. And then a third writer came in and then they made it into, something like Infinity Gauntlet. You know what I mean? So there were these, although I guess that's a bad example because it was really all Jim Starlin. But it was Jim Starlin refining his own idea over the years. You know what I'm saying? Going all the way back to Warlock.
Oh, absolutely.
So they're not.
Drax. I mean, Drax is a Starlin character.
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
right?
So they don't like real. What I'm not seeing is the studios recognizing the incubator that the cream that's risen to the top that they've plucked has to come from these churn and burn monthly stories where certainly some are great, some are not, but it takes time to see which stories resonate and which stories spark other maybe better ideas in other writers, and so then that story becomes an iconic. And that's going to be the shame of the slowly dying direct market.
Yeah.
Is
Well,
that
Winter
all those
Soldier
incubator all those incubator stories are just going to go away.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you there.
Oh,
Yeah, well, Winter Soldier is a perfect example of what you just said because there's a character where without the history of Bucky and the
yes.
long, his apparent death and long-standing disappearance, and then Brubaker coming up with that Winter Soldier story, and
Yep.
then
And how many times was
arguably
he
probably
teased
the
to come
best.
back?
Yeah, yeah. Like I would say Winter Soldier is probably like top 3 of those Marvel movies for sure.
Oh, Winter Soldier
At least
absolutely is for me too. Yeah.
from my books. Yeah. But anyways, yeah, it's crazy. So that's the thing that like you see these huge fandoms built off the movies, which is amazing because these characters and the stories are fantastic, and I love them, and I watch all of them.
Same.
And I'm excited by them, and I can't believe we live in this era back when I used to go to the video store and rent the Punisher movie and the Captain America movie and the Thor made-for-TV appearance
Oh,
and
yeah.
the Hulk movie, and they were just those were what you got, and you got excited like when like the Rocketeer came out. It's like, wow, this is a really great superhero movie. And,
Having
like, for
to
years,
having to defend.
yeah.
No, really, the Daredevil and the Hulk movie. He looked pretty close to his accurate costume.
Right? I mean, these are the things, and it's like it's this hive mind from that era that I think many of us can associate with.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what comes, that's the stuff I love, and then I also love rap.
Yeah.
And I've lifelong rap, like passion. As nerdy as I am about comics, I'm that nerdy about rap and hip hop beats and everything. So that's where the two came together for me. Like after recording so many songs and writing, like I just kept writing about the stuff I loved and the stuff I wanted to make songs about.
Mhm.
And to me, a big part about hip hop and rap is being true to yourself and being, keeping it real, like, for lack of a better term, that's what it is. And I've just kept it real to who I am. And I guess I'm just like extremely nerdy about this stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And I like to rhyme about it.
Totally. And outside of absolute catchy beats and great rhyme and all and rhythm and all that stuff, I think from my experience with you, authenticity is absolutely what I see in all these songs. There is such a minute level of detail. They say in comedy, detail is where it's funny. You don't say, I went to the store and something crazy happened. You say, no, I went to the Ralph's and something crazy happened. Like you name the store, you name the seat you were sitting in, and because that puts the listener in a time and a place, and you've managed to achieve that with pretty much every song I heard. There's such a specificity
thank you.
that
Wow.
they know this guy knows what he's talking about, and even if I don't get every reference, I get the inference of the reference. Therefore, I'm emotionally with him on that journey. So solid.
Well, thank you. Can I be on your show every day?
If you need an ego boost, Burglar, you're absolutely welcome to be on this show.
I'm glad you get what I'm doing, man.
I get it, man. I get it. And the listeners,
I'm having fun.
Yeah, listeners, really want you guys to get this too. Really, I don't know if you, well, you're on Spotify and all that stuff. So however you're listening to music, I'm still an old head. I still like to own my, as much as I can own a digital copy. So I went to iTunes and snapped it up. They're absolutely reasonably priced. Or you said you're on Bandcamp too. I know that's a great platform.
Yeah, and Bandcamp, I actually, and I'll
probably
tell
get more
Bandcamp,
proceeds.
Yeah, and well, at Bandcamp, I put a lot of it up for name your price, which means you can get it for $0. So you can go to Bandcamp and download, and that's why I like Bandcamp so much.
Yeah.
It was the only place that I could just put up, like when I released Cobra Island, I didn't want to charge for it. I just put it up for free.
Dynamite.
As a free download, and it's still up there. So if you're a G.I. Joe fan listening, you want to take a risk, even if you don't like rap at all, I would, I challenge you to just go and download Welcome to Cobra Island for free. Type in 0 on my Bandcamp page, check it out, get the MP3s, and tell me if you like it. If you don't like it, whatever. It didn't cost you anything. And if you did like it, well, tell a friend. And so I have a lot of my albums. Bergonomics on there for Name Your Price, Spinnerack's on there for Name Your Price, and I have other G.I. Joe songs on some other albums, and Space First. I have a bunch of Star Wars and Transformers, Visionaries for any other Sunbow heads out there.
Yeah, you're. What was it? The Blame and Humanoid song? That was pretty good.
I do blame. How
freaky they were! Yeah.
They're responsible. That's it.
That's pretty tight, man. Yeah. So thanks, listeners, that's it, man. You got to do that. You just were literally given the license to go download free. It's like the days of LimeWire and Napster. Go get your free music. You won't
if you need
regret
it. We got the vinyl and CDs.
Yeah, it's super catchy, and I know a lot of listeners, a lot of Joe and Joe listeners, listen to this show with their children and stuff. Everything was super safe to me. It's a good listen, especially if your kids love G.I. Joe, right? I mean,
yeah,
you don't get crazy.
I made it for. That was another big part about making that album. It was like I wanted to make it for 8-year-old me and every 8-year-old kid out there. I didn't want anything on that album to be something that you couldn't read in a Marvel comic book that came out in the 80s. So
it's the same mentality I take on this show. Are we the same person? And I mean, are we the same person, but you're the more talented one with the music abilities? Is that what's happening here?
I mean, that's what it is, right? And it's, I've always found, when I was younger, I would swear more, curse more in songs just because I was young and you don't really think about it. But then something one day clicked and I was like, you know what? It's more challenging for me not to swear. And I liked coming up with other words to say. I think my stuff's been pretty clean since 2013. There's a rhyme for you.
No, that's actually the exact same perspective I do take on the show too. I said that to my wife when I first started. I was like, I think I'm gonna not swear on this show.
Yeah.
And she probably replied with a swear word, and I was like, well, it'll be a challenge.
It is, and there's a bunch of better words out there.
There really are.
There are a lot of words out there, my friend.
And then it's rewarding when you do hear from people who are like, man, I listened to this, with my kid, and I'm like, let's keep it real. So,
hey, I've got kids, and I want to share my stuff with them too. So
that's awesome. Are they into G.I. Joe, or is it one of those rebellion things where like Dad loves it, so we hate it?
They are young. My daughter is 3 and my son is 1. And if they want to be into G.I. Joe, I can definitely help them out with that. My daughter actually found a few. I got back from a little tour and I went to this great shop in Victoria, BC, and they gifted me a bunch of awesome Joes. And they took me to the back room and they were like, hey, what Joes are you looking for? And I'm like, well, I'm always looking for a Secto Viper and blah, blah, blah. Let me, build up some Viper ranks, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, Cherry Bomb Toys. They're amazing. Follow them
Awesome.
on Instagram. They've got great retro stuff. I think your listeners would dig them. And so they gave me a bunch of Joes, and it was great. I brought them home, and I was like unpacking them. They were in my studio, and then my daughter said, "Daddy, where's your yellow? Where's your yellow guy? Your yellow guy?" I'm like, "What yellow guy? What are you talking about?" She's like, "The super guy." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she had found my Secto Viper and was playing with it, and she really liked it. And I was like, "This is amazing! Like, yeah,
great.
these O-ring toys are the best."
They really are.
So
Yeah.
I can't wait. So now I'm trying to get a whole box of O-rings together that she can enjoy.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Burglar, thank you so much. You know, we were talking earlier. We were gonna bring in some mention of the GI Joe music itself, but I think your instinct was right. We don't need to. This is all about the Berg and these fabulous raps. I mean, just real quick, I know that theme song burned into my head at such a young age, and then when you see the movie and they expand on it, do you have any recollections of that? Like moment of like, oh my God, they took something that I knew and they made it even bigger and better.
Oh yeah, 100%. That G.I. Joe movie, I could go on and on about that alone. The music, when they,
Yeah,
it's epic. Yeah, I still get chills thinking about it and hearing it, and like da da da. It's just like so like da 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 Cobra. Like huge credit to the musicians and the writers who worked on that stuff. And I know in retrospect, there's some of the creatives who worked on that movie have talked about like, oh, this was like a bit sillier than we thought. I was like, no, like don't apologize, because to me, being that kid watching G.I. Joe the movie, the real movie, the only movie, the animated movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for real. Yeah,
it blew my mind, and that's why, like, as much as I love Larry Hama's run, and I love the balance of military and Zartan, for lack of a better word, in the Marvel comics, right? Like, he had the outlandish, crazy, superhero-y stuff, but also had like this real Vietnam stuff with Snake Eyes and Stalker and Storm Shadow and everyone. I love that balance, but the cartoon did have that license to be a bit more out there and delve into that more fantasy area. And I thought Cobra La was perfect for that.
Yeah, you had a great song about that on Cobra Island too. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think, and again, we could go on and on about this, but Cobra La freaked me out. You were talking earlier about knowing everything you know is a lie, like, with the Ralph Pulaski, which I also have a song about Ralph Pulaski on the MacGuffin device. And so it's called Cobra Apocalypse. It's what happens next. So I have a whole series I'm working on for that. That's what I'm pitching for my comic.
Oh, that's great.
Ralph Pulaski story. But
Cobra
La, yeah, it was like everything you know is a lie, and I was like, it blew my mind as a kid when I was like, wait, what? Cobra Commander is what? This is Cobra La is what? They're gonna like melt humans and turn them into these zombie monsters, and they're gonna use these spores to like destroy the earth? Like, what? G.I. Joe's got to stop them, like. And even the Cobras, like, I love when, like, even there are moments in that movie where even the Cobras recoil at the terror that Cobra La is about to unleash. They're like, whoa, we didn't want to go this far. It's and that's there's a lot in that
we
movie.
Want a world to rule when we're done. You guys just want to destroy the world. We do want to rule the world when it's all said and done.
Yeah, there's a lot in there, and all the voice actors and the director, like the directing in those cartoons, like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's dynamite.
Zartan is a star. The performances,
and always the best explosions. So the best explosions in any animation, like, any, like, we'll say any regularly weekly show / daily show cartoon. No one beats G.I. Joe for explosions. Whatever that technique, whatever special recipe they used, I loved watching things explode, because it just had this tension in all the burst bubbles, all the burst smoke and fire. There was just always a tension there that you're just like, that's impressive. So
it's true. And it was better. It's funny because Transformers was a lot of the same people, and there's good stuff. There's great stuff in the Transformers cartoon, but rewatching Transformers and G.I. Joe at the same time, like the Sunbow stuff, I will, like, the one thing that stood out to me about Transformers was there's a lot of name calling. They're all like every episode the robots are just calling each other Rust Bucket, Chrome Dome. Like it's just like this is half the episode, just robots name calling each other.
It's like listening to 1980s Force.
There you go. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. Those names, like someone's like, "What is Last Nerve?" I'm like, "Come on."
Yeah, no,
There's
that's
a guy in G.I.
Last
Joe
Nerve's
named
great.
Short Fuse.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
it's not that big a stretch.
yeah. No, you nailed it with that. So, thank you, Wordburglar. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show this week. This really is lovely to meet you, and I really dig your stuff, man. If it's not apparent.
Back at you, Joe. Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I feel like we could just keep going.
Yeah,
so,
we will.
you need to fill some air.
I hope you'll visit I hope you'll visit Joe and Joe again in the future.
My pleasure. Anytime, man.
Wonderful.
Yo, Joe.
Yeah. So, listeners, check him out. You heard all the details, and now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.
You can find me selling automatics to the melodramatic. They got the cash, I got a stash. It's a hell of a habit. Well established in the practice of helping the masses blow up each other's stuff. I'm diplomatic, pragmatic. Can't make a business out of acting nice. You're looking at the man who built the mass device. From satellites to plants that grow to massive heights. Got what you need, and I always get my asking price. This ain't a passive fight. Keep me out your blasting sights. Unless, of course, you're prepared to get your asses wiped. That's just a fact of life. Grew up in harm's way. And these wrist rockets aren't for cosplay. I am the arms race, amulet wearing super inventor. I even helped create Serpentor, your mentor. Highly skilled tactician. You trying to take me out? Should've started practicing hundreds of years ago. I'll try and make it clearer so you can understand. You never ever met a fiercer foe. Look in the mirror, yo, that's beryllium steel. My family heirloom, worn with militant zeal. Ill super skilled as a villain for real. Got the public hating on me like I'm killing some seals. A brilliant heel. Better stop spinning my wheels. Pick up the bill for my meal. And if you're willing to deal, call Destro. They're staking the name. I invented putting snakes on a plane. Call Destro. Got what you need to knock them dead. From battle barges to infrared rocket Call sleds. Destro. For nothing but the best, bro. We accept credit, cash, and checks. Call Destro. We never use old parts. And if I'm not around, ask for Voltar.
What's the all the guns is for? Doing jobs for bills, hard to kill. What's the all the guns is for?
Making money.
Transcarpathia, swamps of the Everglades. Crossing me's the worst mistake you could ever make. Skeletons in my closet, attic full of ghosts. The baddest men alive, laugh at my jokes. Proud and noble with a whole lot of common sense and no tolerance for incompetence. Enjoy the finer things like fistfuls of dollars, luxury castles, wine, disco collars. And when it comes to women, there's no comparing this. The only man who's had Zorana and the Baroness. I'll take care of it, sign right here. Or my Iron Grenadiers, I have you crying in your beers. To be clear, put every last combatant in the past tense. We're making cash, cause I own all the patents. Military, armaments, research syndicate. Means any war I'm in, I'm winning it. A little bit hard, yeah you bet I'm hard. I got my own code, it starts with your credit card. You wanna win? You better be the highest bidder. Cause as it happens, my top clients slither. Super attack bats, mutant pack rats, souped up goons and platoons with backpacks. Atomic shrink rays, orbital tractor beams. I got it all for every kind of wacky scheme. Call Destro. Whether you're fueling rebel squadrons or looking to duel in the devil's cauldron. Call Destro. As long as they got the money, I'll incite unrest in unstable countries. Call Destro. For nothing but the best, bro. We accept credit, cash, and checks. Call Destro. I'm not someone to put a mark on. You must have me confused with Dark Lawn.
What's the all the guns is for? Doing jobs for bills, hard to kill. What's the all the guns is for?
Making money.
Gun.
You got what you need. Got what you need. Got what you need. Got what you need.